So you might have heard a little bit about Hyenas, a new sci-fi first-person extraction shooter. Right now, it's in closed beta, and Sega have sponsored this video, so thanks to them, to give you guys an overview and some of my impressions from playing the game for the last few days. So let's get into it. Starting off, I'll give you a little bit of a rundown of what Hyenas actually is. It's developed by Creative Assembly, and it's a hero-based extraction shooter that pits 5 teams of 3 against each other in this kind of chaotic battle aboard what's called a plunder ship to secure loot, which is called merch, and fight off AI enemies to secure enough merch for you to extract from the plunder ship. Now, one major gameplay twist in Hyenas compared to other extraction shooters out there is zero gravity. You're going to have to think quickly when taking on enemy teams who might come at you from an angle that you don't expect. These zero gravity areas aren't always zero gravity. You can turn that on and off. So it could be in the middle of a fight, maybe an enemy player or one of your teammates turns on zero gravity and everything completely changes. The hero shooter element comes into play quite a lot here because you're going to play as different hyenas, which is where the game gets its name, who all have different abilities, different weapon sets and skills that you can use in gunfights with enemy teams. Right now in the closed beta, there's 8 or 9 different hyenas that you can play with, all with their own playstyle options, and there's just one plunder ship that you can play on. The plunder ship is basically the name for a map in this game, and it's called Earth Vintage. Now, as to why you're doing all this in the game called Hyenas, well, apparently there was a big tech company called Clout, which created a manipulation gravity device, but only billionaires could afford access to it. On Earth, one of these gravity engines failed, and it caused this huge collapse, and most of the world's population ended up dying, with just a few escaping. Those that did escape were left to fend for themselves in a giant floating space slum that was orbiting that broken Earth, nicknamed the Taint. Clout's solution to destroying Earth was to replace lost societal pillars like arts and politics with a concept called the brand. It's all very dystopian. Essentially, the merch that you extract in a match of Hyenas elevates your status. These items are desirable, like old Earth clothing, media, electronics, and more. All of these items are hosted on plunder ships, the maps that you play on in Hyenas. The Hyenas themselves, though, they don't like what these billionaires are doing, and they're stealing these rare items back. So hopefully you understood all of that. So what's the gameplay like? Well, I'm normally a boots-on-the-ground kind of guy. I like my gunfights grounded in reality, but here in Hyenas, zero gravity is a big part of the gameplay loop. So I did my best to get involved with that, to get a proper feel for it, and I did get used to it. The movement in zero G isn't insanely fast or twitchy, so it's not too difficult to go and track a target and land your shots, and that was a big concern that I had going in at the beginning of the game, and it didn't feel like, at least at this stage, that there were many ways to exploit that zero G ability to produce like insane movements that could get you out of sticky situations and give yourself a massive leg up over enemy players. It kind of gave me the idea that they're trying to push down a real level playing field overall. And right now, since the game is only going through closed beta, you've got plenty of new players joining in for the first time, sort of just trying to make their way through matches. So I think trying to have a level playing field as much as possible is kind of important. Having movement that is easy to read and easy to use is always a good starting point. Not all areas of the map are zero G, however. As I mentioned earlier, there are some standard grounded combat areas to be had, and the game uses a fairly simple inventory system to manage all your weapons, all of your gear, and you've got a few different slots to carry items like grenades, shield recharges, and throwables for your gunfights. Now, all around the map are these gear-up locations you can enter. You spawn in one with your team at the beginning of the game, and they're full of AI enemies for you to take out as you get yourself started. Hyenas is intended as a PvP game, but it has these PvE elements in it to keep you on your toes. There's even an entire PvE mode that you can select in the menu, but it's framed more as an extended tutorial for the game, almost like a sightseeing tour of the maps and getting yourself familiar with the game. In these PvE areas, though, you'll find all the usual health items, shield vests that go up in effectiveness, shield recharge batteries, grenades, throwables, items, and even more. These are the areas that you'll likely end up fighting in as well, because other teams can come in and attack you whilst you're gearing up. They are quite claustrophobic locations, so getting to know them pretty well is going to be important if you want to make sure that you're not the first of the 5 teams dying, like I was in the rounds that I played. These gear up locations also feature a merch vault containing much higher tier gear and merch items that will add towards your team's score for the round. Now, these vaults need to be breached directly, unlike the gear up boxes, so you need to head over to it and plant a breaching device on the door, and that will cut the vault open. Now, it takes a little while to start this process, and it does alert enemy AI that you're there trying to do it, and it will send in a bunch of harder AI to try and stop you doing what you're doing. And of course, enemy teams are also able to come in and steal the vault's merch as well, so be on the lookout for those enemy teams. You do get quite a few call-outs from an in-game announcer about the progress of other teams in your match. If one of them is completely eliminated by another, the game will let you know so that you kind of have an idea of what you're going to be facing later on. As I said earlier, each match has 5 teams of 3 players each, and matches typically last about 10 minutes or so. As you get closer to the end of a match, and you've met your quota for the merch that you've collected, you'll activate the VIP gateway, which is the extraction point. This is marked for you on the map, and you'll need to head over there, activate it directly, and then defend the location against AI grunts and other enemy player teams who might come in and try and take you out, steal your merch, and then take the VIP getaway in your place. This kind of creates like a mosh pit scenario towards the end of the game, where the remaining teams, they're all just going to clash together to be the team that gets out of the plunder ship with all of that merch. Hyenas is showcasing a lot of the cosmetics that are going to be available in the final game in this closed beta. Being a Sega game, there are some not-so-subtle references to some of their other owned IPs in certain areas. In my opinion, it would have been better to just focus players more on the gameplay of Hyenas in the closed beta, rather than the cosmetics, but with the way games are these days, being set up as live services, I can see why the team would want players to understand the entirety of the game that they're considering getting into. The visual presentation of the game, it is very brash, it is very noisy, it is in your face. It's not really to my taste, to be honest, and I often found it quite difficult to read the game, with so much happening on the screen sometimes. I did find that turning off the camera shake and camera bob options in the settings, that helped improve that feeling of not knowing what was going on a little bit. But in general, the presentation of the game is very bright, it is very bold, it is very in your face. That, coupled with the music in the menus, you can very quickly get a feel for what this game is going to be like. So that's Hyenas, a new extraction shooter that might be of interest to you. I've been given a bunch of codes for the game on Steam for the closed beta, which I've put in a pinned comment below this video, so if you do want to check out the game, then grab one of those codes before they go, and you can give it a try. The closed beta runs until September the 11th. Thanks for watching, thanks to Sega for sponsoring, and I'll catch you soon.